Ryan sat alone in the crowded spaceport, watching travelers hurry past with glowing bags and mechanical pets that clicked on the floor. He had flown ships for years, carrying goods across systems where humans were only rumors, most nights. He ate in silence inside his small freighter. The silence had become heavy, so heavy that even the hum of the engine felt like loneliness speaking back to him. When he first saw the sign, he had not planned to stop. It was a tall building with silver letters that said Companion Hall. On the station, it was known as a legal place where travelers could spend one night in the company of someone who would talk, share a meal, or simply listen. It was not forbidden, and it was not dangerous, yet Ryan had never gone inside before. But that night, his heart felt tired. He told himself he only wanted someone to speak with, someone who could remind him that life was more than cargo routes and empty cabins. The hall smelled of clean metal and flowers sprayed into the air. Behind a desk, an attendant looked at him with curious eyes. Humans were rare in this region. The attendant asked what kind of companion he wanted. Ryan said he wanted someone who could tell him about the stars. The attendant raised an eyebrow, but nodded. Soon, she entered the room. She was taller than most humans, her skin faintly glowing under the lights, and her eyes like pools of shifting silver. She walked slowly, almost carefully, as if each step had to be measured. Her name, the attendant said, was Alira. When she sat across from Ryan, she gave a polite smile, the kind a person uses when they are trained to smile. He noticed how her fingers rested on the table, slightly tense, as if she was ready to stand again at any moment. "You are human," she said softly, her voice carrying a musical sound. "Yes," Ryan answered, "and you are not surprised." "I have seen humans before," she replied, though her eyes searched his face as if testing whether she should trust him. "Most of them did not come here." Ryan laughed once, not in mockery, but in truth. "Most humans would never think of it. But tonight, I wanted someone to talk to. Someone who remembers the stars in a different way than I do." Her silver eyes widened slightly, and the trained smile faded into something more natural. For a moment, she seemed unsure how to answer. Then she leaned closer. "I remember the stars very well," she whispered. That night, they did not speak of ordinary things. They spoke of the first constellation she had learned as a child, of how her people believed the stars were seeds thrown across the sky by ancient gardeners. Ryan told her about the blue oceans of Earth, about how sailors once guided their ships by following the North Star. She listened with wonder, for Earth was a word she had only read in old records. Time passed, and the silence between them grew softer, like a blanket rather than a wall. Alira asked him what freedom felt like, and Ryan was caught off guard. He told her freedom was not one feeling, but many, sometimes heavy, sometimes light, sometimes lonely. She nodded as if she understood, though her eyes carried a sadness that words could not hide. Later, when they walked through the garden dome of the hall, Ryan noticed how she stopped to touch the leaves of a glowing tree. She closed her eyes as if trying to remember something long lost. "You like the garden," Ryan said. "I miss places like this," she answered. Her voice was almost too quiet to hear. They sat on a bench beneath the artificial sky of the dome. The stars projected above were fake, but she looked at them as if they were real. Ryan realized he had never met anyone who looked at stars like that, not with ownership, not with hunger, but with longing. The night ended with a simple farewell. She bowed slightly, her silver eyes watching him for one last moment before the attendant led her away. Ryan felt a pull in his chest, as though something important had just been taken from him. He told himself it was foolish. It had only been one night, but when he returned to his freighter, the silence inside felt heavier than ever. The hum of the engine sounded empty. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the way Alira had touched the glowing tree, the way she had asked about freedom, the way she had looked at stars. Ryan had rented her company for one night. He told himself that was the end of it, yet deep inside, he already knew it was not. Something had begun, though he could not name it. Something stronger than loneliness had stirred in him, and it carried the shape of silver eyes. And as the freighter lights dimmed for rest mode, Ryan whispered into the dark, I should not see her again. But even as he spoke the words, he knew he would return. The next morning, Ryan woke early, but he did not feel rested. He had spent the night thinking of Alira. He told himself it was foolish to return to the companion hall. One night was enough. That was the rule, the agreement, the way of the station. Yet, when he walked through the market, past the glowing stalls and shouting traders, his feet carried him back toward the silver-lettered building. The hall was quieter during the day. The attendant raised an eyebrow when she saw him again. Back. So soon? She asked. I just want to see her again, Ryan said. That is not how it works. The attendant replied. She was assigned for one night. Another client may call for her today. Ryan's jaw tightened. He almost turned to leave, but then he heard a soft voice behind him. It is all right. Let him through. Alira stood in the hallway. She wore the same pale cloak, her silver eyes lowered politely, but Ryan saw a flicker of something deeper. The attendant gave a small shrug and let him pass. They walked together to a quiet room filled with glowing glass walls. The light made her skin shine softly. Ryan wanted to speak, but she looked away, and for a moment silence pressed between them. Finally, she said, You should not be here. Maybe. Ryan admitted, but I could not stop thinking of our talk last night. You asked about freedom. No one asks that without reason. Her shoulders tensed. She turned her face toward the glass wall, where star-like lights drifted slowly. You are human. You do not understand. Then explain, he said. His voice was calm but firm. Alira hesitated. Her fingers pressed against the glass, tracing one of the drifting lights. At last, she whispered, I'm not here by choice. I was taken years ago by dead law. My family lost everything, and I was given to the hall to repay the cost. They call it a contract, but it is a chain. Ryan's stomach turned. So you were forced to stay here? She nodded, though her silver eyes shone with pain. Clients come and go. Most do not care to ask about my story. Most prefer silence or pretend laughter. But you spoke to me of stars and oceans. For a moment, I forgot the walls. And when you left, I remembered them again. Ryan looked at her closely. Now he saw what had been hiding beneath her polite smile, the weight in her eyes. It was not only sadness, it was a secret she carried like a locked door. Why did you tell me this? He asked. Because I think you will leave soon, she answered. And if I never see you again, at least one person will know the truth. Her words struck him harder than he expected. He thought of his lonely freighter, the endless routes, the silence of space. Freedom was heavy, yes, but at least it was his own. And here was someone who had never known it at all. I will not forget, Ryan said quietly. Alira's eyes lifted to his. For the first time, the silver glow inside them seemed to soften, as though light itself had bent into something fragile. Most forget, she whispered. That is why I never tell them. Ryan clenched his hands. He wanted to promise her something more, but the words would not come. He did not yet know what he could do. They left the glass room and walked again. Through the garden dome. This time, she stopped not only at the glowing tree, but also at a pool of water, where small lights swam like fish. She bent down, her reflection shimmering with silver eyes. When I was a child, she said, I thought water could carry songs. I would sing to rivers, hoping the sound would travel to the stars. Did it work? Ryan asked, kneeling beside her. She smiled faintly, though sadness remained. I do not know. But last night, when you spoke of Earth's oceans, it felt like my song had finally reached somewhere. Ryan stared at her reflection. Alira, if you could go anywhere, where would you go? She closed her eyes. Somewhere without walls. The words hung in the air like a vow. They sat there longer than they should have. When a chime echoed through the dome, Alira stood quickly. I must return, if I am gone too long. Questions will come. Wait, Ryan said. When will I see you again? She shook her head. You should not return. It will only make it harder. But her eyes betrayed her voice. In them, he saw the same longing that pulled at his own chest. She wanted him to come back. As she walked away, Ryan felt torn. Logic told him to leave, to forget her, to fly his freighter far from this station. But his heart burned with anger at the thought of her being treated like property. He could not ignore the secret she had given him. That night, back on his ship, Ryan sat in the dim cabin. He could still hear her voice speaking of rivers and songs, still see her eyes fill with quiet pain. His fists tightened on the table. I cannot walk away, he whispered to himself. Not this time. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose stronger than survival. Alira was not just a companion for hire. She was a person bound by chains she did not deserve, and though he did not yet know how, Ryan swore to himself that he would break those chains, somewhere beyond the walls of the station. The stars burned silently, but in Ryan's heart, a fire had been lit, and that fire would not go out. The next morning, Ryan woke early, but he did not feel rested. He had spent the night thinking of Alira. He told himself it was foolish to return to the companion hall. One night was enough. That was the rule, the agreement, the way of the station. Yet, when he walked through the market, past the glowing stalls and shouting traders, his feet carried him back toward the silver-lettered building. The hall was quieter during the day. The attendant raised an eyebrow when she saw him again. Back so soon? She asked. I just want to see her again, Ryan said. That is not how it works. The attendant replied. She was assigned for one night. Another client may call for her today. Ryan's jaw tightened. He almost turned to leave, but then he heard a soft voice behind him. It is all right. Let him through. Alira stood in the hallway. She wore the same pale cloak, her silver eyes lowered politely, but Ryan saw a flicker of something deeper. The attendant gave a small shrug and let him pass. They walked together to a quiet room filled with glowing glass walls. The light made her skin shine softly. Ryan wanted to speak, but she looked away, and for a moment silence pressed between them. Finally, she said, You should not be here. Maybe. Ryan admitted, but I could not stop thinking of our talk last night. You asked about freedom. No one asks that without reason. Her shoulders tensed. She turned her face toward the glass wall, where star-like lights drifted slowly. You are human. You do not understand. Then explain, he said. His voice was calm but firm. Alira hesitated. Her fingers pressed against the glass, tracing one of the drifting lights. At last, she whispered, I'm not here by choice. I was taken years ago by dead law. My family lost everything, and I was given to the hall to repay the cost. They call it a contract, but it is a chain. Ryan's stomach turned. So you were forced to stay here? She nodded, though her silver eyes shone with pain. Clients come and go. Most do not care to ask about my story. Most prefer silence or pretend laughter. But you spoke to me of stars and oceans. For a moment, I forgot the walls. And when you left, I remembered them again. Ryan looked at her closely. Now he saw what had been hiding beneath her polite smile, the weight in her eyes. It was not only sadness, it was a secret she carried like a locked door. Why did you tell me this? He asked. Because I think you will leave soon, she answered. And if I never see you again, at least one person will know the truth. Her words struck him harder than he expected. He thought of his lonely freighter, the endless routes, the silence of space. Freedom was heavy, yes, but at least it was his own. And here was someone who had never known it at all. I will not forget, Ryan said quietly. Alira's eyes lifted to his. For the first time, the silver glow inside them seemed to soften, as though light itself had bent into something fragile. Most forget, she whispered. That is why I never tell them. Ryan clenched his hands. He wanted to promise her something more, but the words would not come. He did not yet know what he could do. They left the glass room and walked again. Through the garden dome. This time, she stopped not only at the glowing tree, but also at a pool of water, where small lights swam like fish. She bent down, her reflection shimmering with silver eyes. When I was a child, she said, I thought water could carry songs. I would sing to rivers, hoping the sound would travel to the stars. Did it work? Ryan asked, kneeling beside her. She smiled faintly, though sadness remained. I do not know. But last night, when you spoke of Earth's oceans, it felt like my song had finally reached somewhere. Ryan stared at her reflection. Alira, if you could go anywhere, where would you go? She closed her eyes. Somewhere without walls. The words hung in the air like a vow. They sat there longer than they should have. When a chime echoed through the dome, Alira stood quickly. I must return. If I am gone too long, questions will come. Wait, Ryan said. When will I see you again? She shook her head. You should not return. It will only make it harder. But her eyes betrayed her voice. In them, he saw the same longing that pulled at his own chest. She wanted him to come back. As she walked away, Ryan felt torn. Logic told him to leave, to forget her, to fly his freighter far from this station. But his heart burned with anger at the thought of her being treated like property. He could not ignore the secret she had given him. That night, back on his ship, Ryan sat in the dim cabin. He could still hear her voice speaking of rivers and songs, still see her eyes fill with quiet pain. His fists tightened on the table. I cannot walk away, he whispered to himself. Not this time. For the first time in years, he felt a purpose stronger than survival. Alira was not just a companion for hire. She was a person bound by chains she did not deserve, and though he did not yet know how, Ryan swore to himself that he would break those chains, somewhere beyond the walls of the station. The stars burned silently, but in Ryan's heart, a fire had been lit, and that fire would not go out. The freighter drifted away from the station, engines glowing softly as it moved into open space. Ryan sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls, but his thoughts were not on the ship. They were on Alira, who sat beside him, her silver eyes wide as she watched the stars. For years, he had flown alone. The chair beside him had always been empty, and silence had been his only companion. Now the silence felt different. It was no longer heavy. It was filled with her quiet breathing, her small gasps of wonder when a comet trail lit the distance, and her questions about each system they passed. Do you ever get tired of it? Alira asked, pointing toward the endless dark. Tired of space? Ryan glanced at her. Sometimes. It can feel empty, but it is also freedom. You can go anywhere as long as you have fuel and food. Her eyes softened. Freedom? I am still trying to understand that word. You will, Ryan said gently. One day at a time. They spent their first hours together in silence, broken only by her questions about the freighter. She touched every control panel with care, fascinated by the glowing lights. When he showed her the navigation screen, she leaned close, studying the map of stars. There are so many, she whispered, and each one might have a world, more than we could ever visit in one lifetime. Ryan agreed, but that means the choice is yours. You can decide where to go. The words made her pause. She turned her face toward him, and he saw a small smile. My choice, she repeated softly, as though tasting the word for the first time. Later, in the galley, Ryan prepared food. The freighter's meals were simple, mostly nutrient packs and heated grains, but Alira seemed delighted. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were something rare. This is better than the haul, she admitted. It is not much, Ryan said, embarrassed. It is more than enough, she replied. That night, he showed her to her new cabin. She stood in the doorway, her eyes moving across the empty space. It had nothing but a bed, a small desk, and a storage locker. Yet to her, it was a kingdom. She walked around slowly, touching the walls, running her fingers across the desk, and finally sitting on the bed. This is mine? She asked. Yes, Ryan said. Yours alone. No one can take it from you. She lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, she whispered, I never thought I would have a place again. Ryan watched her, then stepped back. Rest, Alira. Tomorrow, we begin our journey. When he returned to the cockpit, he sat quietly, listening to the hum of the engines. For years, that sound had been his only comfort. Now it felt like a song of something new beginning. The next morning, Alira appeared in the cockpit, her silver eyes bright with excitement. "Where are we going?" she asked. Ryan smiled. "That is for you to decide. Look." He pointed to the navigation screen. "These are the nearby systems. Some are trade hubs. Some are farming worlds. Some are wild and unexplored. Which one calls to you?" Alira studied the screen, her finger hovering over glowing dots. Finally, she touched one. That one. The one with the blue ring. Ryan checked the chart. "A small world with oceans and floating markets. Good choice. We will head there." She laughed softly, the sound light and free. "I chose a world." As the ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, she pressed her hands against the glass, watching the stars stretch into streaks. "It feels like running," she said. "It is," Ryan replied. "Running, but also chasing something new." During the journey, Alira began to learn the ship. Ryan showed her how to read the navigation charts, how to adjust the power lines, and how to keep the engines balanced. She asked endless questions, her curiosity never resting at first. Ryan worried she might tire of the work, but she did not. Instead, she threw herself into every task, smiling even when she made mistakes. When the engine alarm beeped because she pulled the wrong lever, she laughed, and the sound filled the cabin with warmth. "You are a fast learner," Ryan told her. "Perhaps," she said. "But mostly, I'm happy to learn because I never could before." One evening, after long hours of travel, they sat together in the galley. Ryan poured 2 cups of warm liquid, a bitter drink humans use to stay awake. Alira took a sip and winced, then laughed. "You drink this by choice?" she asked. "It keeps me alive," Ryan said. "It tastes like metal." Ryan laughed with her, the sound strange in his own ears. He had not laughed so much in years. Later that night, Alira came to the cockpit and sat beside him. She was quiet for a long time, watching the stars. Finally, she said, "I keep waiting to wake up and find myself back in the hall. I keep thinking this cannot be real." "It is real," Ryan said, "and no one can take it away now." Her eyes glistened with emotion. "You gave me this. I do not know how to thank you." "You do not have to," Ryan said softly. "You owe me nothing. We are travelers together. That is all." Her lips curved into a gentle smile. "Travelers. Together," she repeated. The journey stretched on, and with each passing hour, Alira grew more alive. The sadness in her eyes began to fade, replaced by wonder. She laughed more often. She asked more questions. And she moved through the freighter as though it were her true home. For Ryan, it was as though the ship itself had changed. The same walls, the same carters, but everything felt warmer. The freighter no longer hummed with loneliness. It hummed with life. As they approached the blue-ringed world, Alira leaned forward in her seat. "It is beautiful," she whispered. Oceans sparkled, and rings of ice glittered like jewels. "I never thought I would see something like this with my own eyes." Ryan smiled, watching her expression. He had seen many worlds, but seeing them through her eyes made them new again. And in that moment, as the freighter descended toward the glowing planet, Ryan knew something had begun. Not just a journey across space, but a journey of hearts. The stars were endless, the dangers many, but he no longer feared them, because now he was not alone. The freighter touched down gently on the blue-ringed world. The docking bay was alive with noise merchants shouting, engines roaring, and glowing signs inviting travelers to markets that floated on the wide oceans. Ryan and Alira stepped out. Together, and the air carried the smell of salt and spice. Alira's eyes widened as she looked around. "So many colors," she whispered. The stalls stretched in every direction, filled with fabrics that shimmered like fire, food steaming with sweet scents, and creatures of every size and shape moving through the crowds. Ryan watched her with a quiet smile. This was why he had brought her away from the station, to see her free, to see her wonder at the galaxy instead of fearing it. She walked slowly, almost carefully, but her silver eyes shone with joy. They wandered through the markets, tasting fruit that burst with sweet juice and watching musicians play instruments that glowed with each note. Alira laughed for the first time in public, her voice mixing with the sound of the crowd. Ryan could not help but laugh with her. But even in the middle of this beauty, Ryan felt something unsettled, a shadow in the corner of his mind. He noticed how some eyes lingered on them longer than they should have. Whispers followed in their steps. It was not just curiosity, it was recognition. That night, back on the freighter, he checked the long-range signals. His worry was confirmed. Messages were moving through the networks. His name, her name. The companion hall had not stayed silent. They had told others that Alira was gone, and worse, that she had been bought by a human. Alira entered the cockpit, her silver eyes soft but alert. She saw his face and grew serious. "Something is wrong," she said. Ryan turned off the screen. "The hall has spread the word. Some see you as valuable property. They will want you back." Her hands clenched. "So I am not safe. You are safe with me," Ryan said firmly. "But we will have to be careful. They will come." The next day, the threat became real. As they prepared to leave the market docks, a larger ship descended with a roar of engines. Its hull was marked with red symbols, the sign of dead hunters, men and women who worked for contracts, reclaiming those who had escaped. Ryan's jaw tightened. He had dealt with hunters before, but never for someone he cared about. They were ruthless, and they never stopped once they had a target. 3 figures stepped out of the ship, their armor dark and sharp, their eyes scanning the crowd. One of them held a glowing device, a tracker. It beeped as it pointed toward the freighter. Alira's breath caught. "They are here for me." Ryan moved quickly. Back to the ship. Now, they slipped into the crowd, weaving between merchants and travelers. Alira clutched his arm, her steps fast but silent. The hunters pushed through the crowd behind them, the tracker's beeping growing louder. When they reached the freighter, Ryan shoved the ram controls. The ship opened, and they ran inside. He slammed the hatch shut as the hunters broke through. The last line of merchants. Blaster fire struck the metal door, sparks flying. "Hold on," Ryan shouted as he jumped into the pilot's seat. The engines roared, lifting the freighter into the sky. Alira gripped the chair beside him as the ship shook violently. The hunter's vessel rose from the docks, its weapons charging. "Can we outrun them?" Alira asked, fear in her voice. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "We will try." The freighter shot into the clouds, the blue ring planet, falling away beneath them. The hunters followed close behind, firing blasts of energy that shook the shields. Alira watched the screen, her silver eyes wide with fear and determination. "Ryan," she said quickly, "I know something. The hunters use tracking signals. That can be confused. If we push the power through your secondary engines, the signal will split." He glanced at her. "You are sure?" "Yes, I learned it from watching their systems at the hall." "Trust me." Without hesitation, Ryan threw the switches. The engines groaned, and sparks flashed across the panels. But then the tracker signal split into directions. On the hunter's screen, the freighter became to targets. "They are confused," Alira said, her voice trembling with relief. Ryan seized the chance, diving the freighter into an asteroid belt at the edge of the system. The hunters tried to follow, but the rocks closed in around them, and one of their wings struck stone. Flames burst across their hull as the freighter slipped deeper into the field. Silence filled the cockpit. Alira sat back, her chest rising and falling quickly. Ryan looked at her, his own breath heavy. "You saved us," he said. Her silver eyes lifted to his. "I only remembered what I saw. But it worked." Ryan smiled faintly. "You are not a burden, Alira. You are my partner." For a long moment, she stared at him, her eyes shimmering. Then she whispered, "No one has ever called me that." The freighter drifted deeper into the asteroid belt, hidden among the rocks. For now, they were safe, but Ryan knew it was only the beginning. The hunters would not stop. Word would spread. More would come. That night, as the stars glowed outside, Alira sat quietly in her cabin. She traced shapes in the air with her fingers, as if drawing constellations. Ryan passed the doorway and saw her, her eyes glowing faintly with determination. He knew then that this was no longer only about escape. It was about a fight for her freedom, and for the bond growing between them. Ryan returned to the cockpit and set the course. His heart was steady. The galaxy was wide, and the threats were many. But he was ready, because he was not fighting alone. The freighter drifted in the quiet shadow of the asteroid belt outside. Rocks the size of mountains floated slowly, blocking the light of distant stars. Inside the cockpit, Ryan and Alira sat together, the air filled with the steady hum of the ship's systems, for hours. They waited. The hunters had retreated after the ship struck an asteroid, but Ryan knew they would return. Dead hunters never gave up. If one group failed, another would take the contract. Alira's freedom was not something the galaxy would accept easily. They will come again, Alira said softly. She sat with her hands folded, but her silver eyes were sharp. Yes, Ryan admitted, and next time, they will bring more ships. Running will not always save us. She looked at him steadily. Then we must fight. Ryan turned to her, surprised by the strength in her voice. Fight? You mean stand against them? Yes, she said. If we keep running, they will chase us forever. But if we stand, if we show them we cannot be taken, they will think twice. They will see we are not weak. For a long moment, Ryan studied her face. She was no longer the quiet girl he had met in the companion hall. She was changing. Freedom had given her strength, and strength had given her courage. You are right, Ryan said at last. Then we prepare. The next days were filled with work. Ryan opened every panel of the freighter, showing Alira the hidden systems. Together, they rewired the engines, reinforced the shields, and built traps from spare parts. Alira's memory of alien technology proved useful. She suggested changes. Ryan had never thought of: circuits that doubled the shield's strength, signal jammers that could confuse trackers, and even a way to hide the freighter's heat signature among asteroids. At night, when their hands were tired and their faces marked with grease, they sat in the galley, eating simple food. But even tired, they smiled. They were building more than defenses. They were building trust. Do you ever regret it? Alira asked one night. Giving up everything you saved for me? Ryan looked at her across the table. Not for one moment. Her silver eyes softened. Then I will never regret standing beside you. The words struck deep in his heart. He nodded, unable to say more, but his silence carried meaning. Soon, their chance came. The hunters returned, and this time not with one ship, but 3. Their engines glowed red as they cut through the asteroid belt, searching. The lead ship carried heavy weapons, stronger than anything Ryan's freighter should face. Alira stood at his side in the cockpit. This is it, she said calmly. Ryan's hands tightened on the controls. Then we show them what we can do. The hunters closed in, their signals sharp and cold. Surrender the girl, a voice growled through the comms. Her contract is valid. You cannot protect her. Ryan answered with steady defiance. She is not your property. She is free. And if you want to test that, come and see. The battle began. The hunters fired first. Red blasts slamming against the freighters. Shields. The ship shook, but the shields held. Ryan darted between asteroids, the freighter weaving like a bird among rocks. Alira activated the signal jammer, and suddenly 2 of the hunters lost their lock. Their shots struck empty stone, sending fragments spinning. Now, Ryan shouted, release the decoys. Alira pressed a switch, and small drones shot out of the freighter, each one glowing with the same heat as the main ship. The hunters' scanners lit up with false targets, scattering their fire. Ryan dove low, pulling the freighter under a massive asteroid. The lead hunter followed, but too close. Ryan fired the engines at full strength, blasting dust and stone into its path. The hunter ship slammed into the rock, its shields cracking under the impact. Flames burst from its side as it spun away. 1 down, Alira said, her voice steady. The other to regroup, circling. Their weapons fired in unison, slamming against the freighter's shields again and again. Sparks lit the cockpit. Warning alarms screamed. They will break through, Ryan muttered. Then we strike first, Alira said. She pointed to the weapons control. Ryan hesitated. His freighter was not a warship. Its guns were weak compared to theirs, but her eyes told him to trust. He fired. The blast hit one of the hunters on its wing. Just enough to unbalance it. The freighter spun, using its momentum to slam the weakened hunter into another asteroid. The explosion lit the dark field, scattering debris. Alira gripped the chair. One left. The last hunter was the strongest, its weapons glowing bright. It charged, determined to finish them. Ryan pulled the freighter into a tight turn. But the hunter stayed close. Shots tore across the shields, sparks raining inside the cockpit. Shields failing, Alira said. Ryan's jaw tightened. Then, we take the risk. Hold on. He steered the freighter straight toward the largest asteroid in sight. The hunter followed, believing he was desperate. At the last moment, Ryan dove under the rock, cutting engines to hide the freighter's heat. The hunter fired wildly, but saw nothing. It circled, confused. Alira leaned forward. Now, strike from below. Ryan reignited the engines, spinning the freighter upward. Their guns fired, striking the hunter's underbelly where its shields were weakest. The blast tore through its engines, and flames lit the void. The hunter spun helplessly, then vanished in a final explosion. Silence filled the cockpit. Only the hum of the freighter remained. Ryan let out a long breath. We did it. Alira turned to him, her silver eyes glowing with triumph. We stood, and we won. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, slowly, Alira reached out her hand. Ryan took it, their fingers locking together. This is only the beginning, she said softly. They will come again. But I am not afraid anymore. Ryan squeezed her hand gently. Neither am I outside. The stars shone brighter than ever, as if watching their victory. Inside, two hearts beat with the same rhythm, no longer chained by fear. Together, they had stood against the galaxy. Together, they had proven that freedom was worth fighting for. The freighter floated in the quiet of space, its hull scarred but whole. The battle in the asteroid belt was over. Smoke still curled from some panels, and the shields were weak. But inside the ship there was peace. Ryan and Alira sat together. In the cockpit, the stars shining bright through the wide glass. For the first time since leaving the companion hall, Alira allowed herself to breathe fully. No chains, no walls, no voices demanding her obedience. Only the endless sky of stars, and the steady presence of Ryan beside her. They will send more hunters, Ryan said quietly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes heavy but alert. The hall has money, and money always finds soldiers. Alira turned her silver eyes toward him. Then we will always be ready. Ryan gave a faint smile. You speak as though you have always been free. I feel free now, she said simply. Her hand brushed against the edge of the console, but her gaze stayed on him. Because you gave me freedom, and because I chose to keep it. Ryan looked at her, and for a long moment he did not answer. He had spent his life working alone, flying from one corner of the galaxy to another, trading goods, fixing ships, surviving. But in all that time, he had never felt what he felt now. Alira was more than a passenger, more than someone he had rescued. She was his partner. The freighter needed repairs, so they landed on a quiet moon near a gas giant. The surface was covered in tall silver grass that waved like the sea, and the sky glowed with colors from the giant planet's rings. They worked together in the open air, fixing the ship piece by piece. Alira learned quickly. She tightened bolts, replaced wires, and even found creative ways to improve the systems. When Ryan praised her work, she smiled, and her silver eyes shone with pride. At night, they built a small fire near the freighter and sat together under the glowing sky. Ryan told stories of old traders, of narrow escapes and strange worlds. Alira listened with quiet wonder, sometimes asking questions, sometimes only watching him with soft eyes. One night, when the fire burned low, she said, "When I was at the hall, I thought my life would never change. I thought I would always be a shadow. But now, I feel I have a place, not just in the galaxy, but with you." Ryan turned to her. The firelight reflected in her silver eyes, making them glow like the stars. He reached out slowly and placed his hand over hers. "You will never be a shadow again. Not while I live." For a while, neither spoke. The silence was not empty, it was full, alive, like the air before dawn. Days turned to weeks. They traveled to quiet places, avoiding crowded ports where hunters might wait. They helped small colonies in exchange for supplies, and in every place, Alira found joy in simple things: children playing, flowers blooming, music played in the open air. She laughed often now, her voice light, carrying through the freighter. Ryan found himself listening for that sound, seeking it even in the hardest moments. But their peace was not without danger. Once, a small band of raiders tried to take their supplies. Ryan prepared for a fight, but before he could act, Alira stepped forward. She spoke calmly, her silver eyes steady, and the raiders lowered their weapons. They left without bloodshed. Afterward, Ryan asked, "How did you do that?" She smiled faintly. "I remember what it felt like to be powerless. I spoke so they would not feel the same. Sometimes words are stronger than fire." Ryan nodded, his respect for her growing deeper. She was not only strong but wise, carrying lessons carved from pain into hope. One evening, as the freighter drifted above a quiet ocean world, Alira stood by the glass, staring at the endless waves below. "Ryan," she said softly, "do you ever think about tomorrow?" He moved beside her. "Always." "I do too," she said. "But before, my tomorrow was only emptiness. Now, I see tomorrow as a place we can walk together, a place we can build." Ryan's chest tightened. He had no words grand enough, so he spoke simply. "Then let us build it." Her silver eyes turned to him, filled with light. "Together, forever." He answered. The word hung between them like a vow. And in that moment, both knew it was true. The freighter became their home. But it was more than steel and engines. It was their bond, their shared strength, their chosen life. Wherever they traveled, they carried that bond with them. Years later, people across quiet corners of the galaxy began to whisper about the human trader and the silver-eyed girl. Some said they could never be caught, that their freighter moved like a ghost. Others said they brought hope wherever they went, helping those who were lost, protecting those who were weak. But for Ryan and Alira, it was never about the stories. It was about the promise they had made to stand together, no matter what came. On one quiet night, as the stars stretched endless around them, Ryan sat in the cockpit, watching the galaxy pass by. Alira entered, her steps light, her presence calm. She sat beside him, resting her hand in his. "No matter how far we go," she said softly, "this will always be enough." Ryan looked at her, his heart steady, his eyes full. "This is everything." Outside, the freighter flew on, small against the endless sky. But inside it carried something greater than power or wealth. It carried a love that had begun in chains, but had grown into freedom, strength, and forever. And in that love, they found their place in the galaxy, not as shadows, not as fugitives, but as two souls who had chosen each other. Forever.